So we're getting into the conversation. You know, the budget was recently read, and of course we continue here on Rise and Shine to discuss and to break down and get different perspective from the varying people who are in governance and so on. So, and to welcome, let's welcome Senator Melanie Roberts Radgman. Good morning. Senator, add it to your name, ma'am. Good morning and welcome. Well deserved and congratulations.
Thank you, Brother B. Good morning and good morning to all of Tobago.
So how does that feel that you carry? And let me just talk a little bit about you, because there are people who don't have a clue who you are and still are inquiring. They don't know that you're an attorney and you did study law, and you will tell us what else you did at Harvard University. Let me say it again. She went to Harvard University earlier. All right, so just tell us the studies and...
Yes, definitely, Brother B. So as you would have mentioned, I studied actually initially political science on the undergrad level. So my bachelor's degree is in political science with emphasis on international relations and policy development as well. From there, I would have gone on to study law at Harvard Law School. Stemming directly out of Harvard, I would have done some work on Capitol Hill, so quite a bit of policy making and advocacy, what they call lobbying in the United States. Following that, upon my return to Trinidad and Tobago, I would have worked with the PSA, so quite a bit of union work, again, heavy advocacy, protesting, going to the various administrative buildings and ensuring that workers' rights are being adhered to. From there, got into law practice, did some work with the THA as well, HR, contracts, that kind of thing. In the background, I have worked alongside two chief secretaries, I think, at this point, Kelvin Charles and then Ansel Dennis while he was there, doing some policy advising, doing some policy development as well for quite some time. So that has kind of been the trajectory. And then, of course, in May of this year, I would have gotten the call and been asked to serve in the position of senator.
Right, so we just established who this young lady is, very powerful and very... and you got all the information so that you hear it from somebody else, so you know. All right, so let's go into you being called the budget. And let me allow Mr. Cox to take you there.
Yeah, because I mean, and again, congratulations. This is the first time we're speaking with you on Rise and Shine since the appointment. But the budget was read recently. But just for clarity, so the Senate cannot amend or make changes to money bills, like the appropriation bill and so on. But the Senate operates more like a review, or reviewing the money bills and, of course, making recommendations.
Correct.
Let's just get the clarity.
Correct, yes, that's exactly what happened. So what you would have seen so far is that the budget would have been laid in the House. The opposition leader would have responded last Friday, I think. And then this week they're going through a very intense exercise, which is the Standing Finance Committee, where members of the opposition sit with the government and go line by line through every single line item in that budget. Ventilate it, ask questions, point out shortcomings or errors, that sort of stuff. So that is the exercise that's taking place right now in the House. And actually I urge, it is a very long exercise and very in-depth, but I urge Tobagonians to log on, to go to Palview or one of the platforms that, you know, live broadcast the committee, and just have a look at what's happening, because it really helps you to understand the nitty-gritty of the budget. That's where the details are. So that's the exercise that's happening right now. I imagine that will wrap up by the end of this week, and then it would come to the Senate for debate. And that's, as you said, where we ventilate a bit more, we make recommendations, we would, you know, highlight areas, especially as relates to policy, or areas in the law where we see either shortcomings or things we hope to see. It's more of an advisory function once you get to the Senate.
Right, and there's a committee or committees that members of the Senate can be part of?
Yes, but it wouldn't relate to the budget, but there are several committees that we have. We have had committee meetings for various topics, so your social equality and equity. There are other finance committees as well. So there are a variety of committees that have been meeting.
Okay, are you, and just before I toss you back to Brother B, are you satisfied with the allocation given this year to the THA?
So here's the thing. I tend to be one of those people who like to make informed decisions So when I initially listened to the reading of the budget without having the documents in front of me, I said, oh, we got a bigger allocation. And of course, as a Tobagonian, you welcome that. I then traveled down to Trinidad, however, on Friday, and I collected my budget package. And it's a huge bag with books year high, with your draft estimates, your revenue line by line it goes through. And I was able to sit down with another senator, Senator Vishnu Danpal, because he's a finance specialist expert. He would have served as a Minister of Finance. He served as a permanent secretary. And we were able to go through line by line. So I see what is happening for Tobago, what is happening to Tobago. And I think having seen that, having gone through that, and I wish I had brought the book this morning. It's also available online for anyone who wants to look. I'm not satisfied at this point. I think what has happened is that we've seen the government read a budget where it was aimed at producing sound bites, and it was aimed at giving people the impression that Tobago's getting so much and that Tobago's affairs are being sought after. But then when you go to the details, you realize that whatever increase we got is in recurrent expenditure. So it's strictly to pay salaries, to rent buildings, things that exist as it is right now. We know that the Salary Review Commission recommendations for increases to the salaries for the Chief Secretary and for secretaries and even members of the judiciary would have been approved some months ago. So you will see a bump in allocation to pay those salaries on account of that. So that is the thing. Those are the things that account for the increase that we have seen. Conversely, in terms of our development allocation, that has actually decreased. So what the central government has done now is given Tobago less money to exercise discretion over its own affairs. It has said, all right, you have salaries to pay, you have things to do that you just can't avoid. You have these expenses, we'll give you the money for it. So you'll see an increase there because, as I said, the Chief Secretary's salary has gone up, secretaries, members of the judiciary, all these salaries have gone up. So you've seen an increase there. However, on the development side, which is where we get to roll out our own programs, our own policies, where we get to undertake the things that we see that are necessary for Tobago, the things that will push us a little bit further, they have decreased our allocation there. So they've kind of stifled our ability to do much.
Very good. But this is nothing new, Dr. Melanie Radgman, that we have always been stifled, whether it's PNM, whichever. I remember having a conversation with you in a different incarnation, and we spoke that. But we seem not to be getting any real investment or interest in our development allocation. Right. So you have done the disaggregation. Yesterday, the Chief Secretary here, we say we do have to disaggregate, and I said for accountability purposes, we got what was for CPEP and URP, from the Secretary of Finance, 18 million for URP, 9 million for CPEP. The recurrent expenditure last year, and that's what I could take from, I don't know how much it would be this year, was 2.376 billion. When you do your subtraction, and you being a Harvard grad, will be able to work that up mentally. So really, and you said that we get less for development. Yes, what is development for you, Senator? What could you, let me, before we go there, I have a peeve, and my peeve is that I cannot stomach that Tobago being an island by itself, and the justification for getting less is given support by we saying our population size and what have you. And when you look at it, the largest slice goes to ministries in Tobago, in Trinidad, without argument or debate. In Tobago, we are to settle with the littlest for development. Recurrent expenditure is a money you can't touch.
Correct.
So let's go there. If, let's say, in your debate, when is the day when the Senate? I
imagine we'd probably start Friday the earliest, Monday the latest.
Right. Yeah. Is there any advocacy for us to abandon and see Tobago as part of the ministries, if it is that is needed, for Tobago to get proper allocation so we could really develop? What would be your argument to your colleagues in the Senate, where we continue to get less for development and Tobago ain't going nowhere? Is how much years now we're trying to develop Tobago? Miss Melanie Radgman, Tobago is 100 years behind. Let's speak to that.
Brother B, I will start by saying this. in December 2024, we had the opportunity, we advocated for Tobago to get more and for Tobago to be able to see about its own affairs. We had the Tobago Island Bill. It went to the Parliament. It was struck down. We had the UNC vehemently arguing against it. We had the TPP in Tobago vehemently arguing against it. Not only did it ensure that we got an increased allocation, but it also gave us additional autonomy to, for instance, legislate on our own behalf, because we know that we have certain nuances here that doesn't affect Trinidad. So it never really comes up on the legislative agenda because it doesn't affect the folks in Trinidad. But we had the opportunity right here to pass our own laws and seek assent from the president. We had the ability to ensure that we got a larger allocation, and that would have directly influence the way that we're able to develop Tobago, you know. Because it's one thing to get the money. The ability to say how it's spent, what it needs to be spent on, what our legislation should look like, what our regulations and policies here will look like. That is a whole different thing. We had that opportunity and we allowed the opportunity to pass.
Right. When we talk development in your mind and your vision, being a senator, what does development, or what you speak to, when we say we want Tobago to develop, what do we mean really? I mean, I could outline a number of areas, but you as a senator will know that, look, you live abroad, you know what development is, you've been to school out there. What does development mean for Tobago, and what would you argue to your colleagues for us to promote that Tobago gets its rightful due in terms of its development? What does that mean?
Of course. What I see in terms of development for Tobago is this: identifying the key areas in Tobago that are lacking. When we think development, we always think about roads, bridges, buildings. But we need to look at things like, all right, how educated and empowered are our people? How marketable are our graduates? What are the social issues that affect us here in Tobago? How are we addressing them? What, in terms of our workforce, what development needs to take place? How do we improve efficiency in terms of public services, government services, how the THA operates, how the various divisions operate? Those are the things I see as development. And let me give you concrete examples. We have an issue taking place in that Store Bay, Pigeon Point, no man's land area, that little hub of tourist activity there, for instance. That is an area that requires severe, intense intervention, and that's where I see development taking place, where we need to develop policy. And I must say that I think it was when Ansel Dennis, the short stint that he spent there, he started drafting policy and he started implementing and trying to get buy-in from stakeholders. So, and it's something that has always been dear to my heart. So I think even in terms of that aspect of tourism, you know, we think about tourism and we think maybe just big hotels and all like that. But even looking at these industries and realizing, okay, they need to be regulated. We need to draft policy that regulates how people operate there. We need to ensure that operators are insured, adequately insured, so that if there's an accident, patrons can be compensated. We need to have hours of operation. So I see developing the policy that's required to operate in those areas, and then putting in place the infrastructure, putting in place the monitoring that needs to go on there, maybe monetizing, as we might need to do. I see that as one aspect of development. So you just kind of go from industry to industry, you go from area to area, you see what our shortcomings are, and then you improve those things, you measure the improvement, and you refine and redefine the process. And that is what I see as development, being able to look back 5 years or 10 years down the road and say, this is how our tourism operators used to operate. These are the kind of incidents we had happening, and we've seen how that has improved over the years. Looking at your THA, for instance, your divisions, and seeing the inefficiencies that take place there, training your staff in customer service, training your staff to be more efficient, ensuring that you have very strict and firm and clear, KPIs and performance metrics in place. Seeing what customer satisfaction looks like, upskilling them in certain areas, maybe digitizing certain aspects of the THA. I see those things as the kinds of development that we need on the island.
I'm thinking about the budget would have been presented from the THA standpoint, would have made its budget proposal, and that would have taken place in June. Of course, that information transferred to central government. The technocrats would meet and discuss, and then we eventually heard the budget presentation. Now that I know it's in the process right now in terms of completing the entire process and before it reaches to the Senate. And the THA would also do its reallocation or reprioritization and so on. But what was presented were 5 pillars, or 6 pillars, if I stand to be corrected, 5 or 6 pillars, identified, as opposed to looking at the individual divisions. That approach, a welcoming approach, and considering what is allocated now, do you envision some of the alignment that you're speaking about happening in this particular fiscal year?
So the first part of the question, in terms of the approach, yes, I think it's a good approach. It's a wise approach, just because sometimes you have, to an extent, some overlap in responsibilities and functioning. So to subdivide strictly by division might not be the most efficient. So I take no issue with that approach. In terms of the allocation and reprioritizing, I think that what we've gotten is woefully insufficient to really address those pillars in any meaningful way. And you know, I say that too because, and I have to take a knock here, we haven't seen the types of intervention that we ought to have seen over the last 4 years. So now that we even have a decrease in terms of developmental, even now where our recurrent expenditure is woefully, it's tied up, it's already accounted for, I cannot see now that there'll be any kind of shift in focus coming from this THA. I think we'd see what we've seen. And let me give you an example. In June, I think it was, we did the mid-year review. We would have been given 32 million, and we know that would have been for, what do you call it? That would have been to account for the increase again in salaries for the, what do you call it? The secretaries, for the chief secretary, and for members of the judiciary. And then we were promised, I think, 100, the CAF loan. And we haven't even received that as yet. We're still asking, where is the CAF loan? It was touted and it was celebrated as something amazing for Tobago, and we haven't seen it yet. So when I see those kinds of indicators, it's difficult now to be hopeful that we may even receive all that we're saying we're going to get.
Okay. So the arrangement, because in the earlier part of the conversation this morning, you referred to 2024 December when the bill was brought to the House. But the arrangement, are you convinced that we can continue with this particular arrangement in terms of the budget presentation and the allocation going to the THA without having a bigger conversation about the bills can you predict when these bills will be brought back to the floor, or we have to wait some years again?
You're playing politics now. No, but I quite agree with you. I do not think until we have that conversation about Tobago, its autonomy, until we bring those bills back to the floor and those bills are passed, I think that we're spinning top in mud at this point. In terms of when we will see it happening, actually, I have a question in for the Senate, but the government hasn't been answering any questions. But one of my questions are, what is your legislative agenda? We need to know what is coming up for the next year. And the reason why I ask that is specifically because I want to know if those bills are going to come to the floor. Interestingly enough,
and it must be answered.
We hope so, yes. It must be answered at some point. But what they've been doing is deferring responses. Every time you go to the Senate, they defer. That's what they've been doing. So I still haven't gotten an answer. I suspect that it's nowhere near the agenda. I haven't seen or representatives on the other side advocating anymore. It was something they advocated for before, but I haven't been seeing anything being advocated now. So we wait.
So, all right, so you would have raised the concern about the Tobago Autonomy Bill, and with no response to it or a satisfactory answer, can you demand as a senator, right? Because I'm saying, right, so if the two representatives, they had to keep quiet, because they don't want to sound fallout-ish. So I don't want to raise things that you're supposed to. So let me keep my mouth quiet until we get opportunity, until they say, hey, go ahead. You being a senator,
Yes,
you're not independent, however, you're a PNM senator, yes? But that matter of the Tobago self-government, maybe if they have a shake-up from the Senate as to why this matter is not being addressed or spoken to, can you demand from the Speaker, is the Speaker, right?
Yes, sir. No, we have the President of the Senate.
President of the Senate, which is, he's acting president now.
Yeah.
Right, as Wade Mark. That, look, this matter is an urgent matter for Tobago.
Yeah.
Madam, sir, I am disappointed that our two representatives are mum on this issue. This is your position. And I'm saying the people, I went on Brother B show and Rise and Shine, and he asked me to ask why is this matter not being raised as an urgent matter of discussion, Ms. Radgman.
So I am very glad that you said that, Brother B, and actually I will call your name in the Senate, and I'll tell you why.
Wait,
I will call your name, I will read your name into the Hansard.
They call me name in that Senate already. I'm on the Hansard.
Listen, and I will read it again a second time, because that is exactly what is taking place right now. I have the question inside about the legislative agenda. If that question remains unanswered, or if I receive an answer that it doesn't include the Tobago Autonomy Bill, the next step will be to raise an urgent motion.
Very good. All right. So, no, and because we know the urgency of this matter, that would treat what you spoke to the marine issue there, that the Chief Secretary did say to the Prime Minister on the press conference after the budget that we need lawmaking powers, because somebody asked a question, some reporter, about that, and then he raised it, apparently she hearing that for the first time. And this is the challenge. And so we you see, for Tobago to get some freeing up, Trinidad does not know our problems here.
Exactly.
They don't know. So people like yourself, and this is why you are here, for us to have a real conversation. I'm not here to dress up nothing with nobody. If we are not approaching our problems, or nobody knows, we are the only ones suffering and will remain suffering because we are not letting the national public know. Half of the time they come up here and they say, oh, I didn't know you had this, I don't know you. Because before you, Dr. Mackenzie said to our colleagues, I did her story. She said, Brother B, you know what me tell them? When I almost come to Tobago and live by somebody for see what we sort of go to. Not go to a hotel. And she said that in dialect. Now, and I'm saying this to say, and coming to this whole question of Tobago's development. Tobago development comes, and every politician, which I charge all of them, we cannot develop unless we get that autonomy issue straightened out. Miss Melanie Radgman, when we go to Senate, I know you have to be following the protocol and so on, but this matter needs to take front center.
Of course, and I give you my word, what I've been doing, no matter the debate that we're having, I've been sticking it in there. And I think this budget debate that's coming up is a perfect opportunity. My focus for this debate will be strictly on Tobago. I don't need to concern myself with what's happening down the road. We have ample senators to deal with that. My concern will be strictly on Tobago. The matter of Tobago's autonomy will be featured strongly in my presentation. As I said, I am going to bring an urgent motion if I receive no kind of response. And this is something that I will continue to hammer home, because the silence on the other side is deafening, and we cannot allow the next four and a half years to pass without this matter being ventilated.
All right, so let's take some goodies from the budget and let's deal with the whole question. Well, this is a not so good one for me. I think the urgency of opening the airport is critical.
Yes, sir.
We have added flights, and if we had this airport up and running for this carnival, I think half of that problem would have been let's speak to that. In the second quarter, are you satisfied that
No, sir.
Talk to us.
No, sir. And again, that would have been an urgent question that I've had in since probably May or June, asking what are the issues, what's preventing the opening of the airport. Still haven't received a response to that either. I think that delay, that's something that should have been prioritized. Even if there were things that needed to be addressed, it should have been immediately prioritized. We should have had that airport up and running by now. That's one of the things as soon as you get in. And even our MPs should have really kind of pushed that to the fore for us. They should have used their voices to advocate for this airport to be open. But I hasten to say this as well, Brother B. It is not enough to just have an airport up and running. We need to ensure that we have what it takes to attract people to the island, whether it's our activities, whether it's our infrastructure, whether it's our room stock. Right now, hoteliers, Airbnb folks, bread and breakfast folks, especially in Southwest Tobago, they are nervous because while they are booked out, that water issue we have going on in Southwest Tobago that has not been even advocated for on our behalf sufficiently, that is a real concern. and they are worried that they're going to have guests staying in their place and water's going to go. So we see these little issues popping up that we need to fix first in order to really imagine a tourist coming here and not being able to access water for 2-3 days.
All right. Let me ask you quickly before Mr. Cox. I have said here with Mr. Cox about desalination because the rainfall has to do with Mother Nature. And if they say no rain, we again no rain, we're in problem. No matter what infrastructural issues Wassa have, even they don't have water to supply, they can't supply it. I have said here that we need to invest in a desalination plant. Given there are varying parts of the Caribbean that supplies use salt water and fresh water running the pipe. The technology is available. I understand Trinidad does have that. Chief, it slipped me to ask him yesterday about that, you know. But anyhow, let's speak to you being senator and the voice that you have that can make people head to. Do we need to invest in a desalination, particularly for Northwest Tobago?
For
Southwest Tobago?
Yes, I think it's important. We've heard about the issues with low water flow in Coreland. That's something that we can't necessarily control, right? We've had a very dry, rainy season, and we're probably, I imagine how brutal the 2026 dry season would be. 100%, we need to invest in a desalination plant, yes.
Before we close this morning, of course, you mentioned the urgent question, and I just want us to get it clear in terms of, so when you present an urgent question, is there a time frame in which it should be addressed?
So this is an urgent motion. So you have
urgent motion, sorry.
So you have your questions that you put in, but the motion allows you to, as a matter of urgency, raise an issue of public interest. So you stand in the Senate, you make your representations, you make your recommendations as well, you make your pleas, and then the minister responsible for whatever issue you're dealing with, they have an opportunity to respond, and then you get to do your winding up. You get a rebuttal of sorts. The idea is to bring the issue to the fore, place it on the Hansard, place it in the public space, bring it to the attention of the minister. And if you, for the most part, if you have the right kind of minister or person at the helm, they should pay some attention. It should be something that they take further steps to. And if you don't get the response that you're hoping for soon enough, you keep hammering it home until it is attended to.
All right, and in terms of the reviewing process with regards to the budget, you said the government will be currently meeting, and that should end by this week. And just for clarity, in terms of when the Senate when the Senate makes its recommendation, how is that taken into consideration? What is the process after those recommendations? Is it just recommendation and it's on paper and that's it? What is the guarantee?
There's, to be fair with you, and especially how we've seen the government operating at this time, sad to say, at least in the Senate, the House is a whole different beast by itself, but in the Senate, we have approached pretty much every bill that's come before us in a collaborative manner. We have not opposed for the sake of opposing. We've taken critical looks and we've, for the most part, made recommendations as opposed to opposing. None of them have been taken. They've been actually very brutally shut down. I imagine it would be the same thing. But at least we would have done our part. We would have, because there's another aspect of this that I don't think people really realize the power of. When you speak in the Senate, even if the government doesn't want to hear you, persons are listening. And the people in the public who are listening, they are constituents of people in the government. So even if you don't want to hear it from senators, sometimes you hear it from your own constituents. You need to serve them, you need their support. So sometimes they're able to really poke and force some sort of change. So even if you're not being listened to in the Senate, you still put it out there into the public space.
Very good. All right, so Ms. Radgman, we're just about ready to wrap. If there is anything you would want to say to the Tobago public about, well, of course, this allocation, we didn't even touch on the rental issue with the landlords and all of that. But there are matters that I know you will raise as a matter of concerns, particularly with the Tobago, given the Tobago difference in the job. All right, so in closing, what would you want to say to the public?
I would say this. We need to take a very critical look at the budget. We are at a very important stage in our development, if you want to call it that, or existence here as Tobagonians. We need to understand what the budget means for us. Pay attention to the Standing Finance Committee. Go on to the Ministry of Finance website and pull down the documentation. You know, talk to your representatives, talk to your senator. We could explain things better. Try to understand what it means. Understand what has been allocated, what has not been allocated. Understand what the terminating of the URP and CPEP program would mean for Tobagonians as well. Eventually, I imagine within a couple of months, we will be seeing and hearing something very, very different.
You suspect they will eradicate it?
Yes, sir. I think so. I think that no party wants to admit, no administration is going to say, especially as we're facing an election, no administration is going to say to you, yeah, well, we have no choice, we're going to send home workers. No one's going to say that. The UNC did the same thing in Trinidad. They didn't say it, they said no one will lose their jobs. And we saw what played out immediately after they took office. Actually, last THA election, we heard the same thing, and we saw what took place immediately thereafter. Because we do not have the kind of funding that we think we have available here in Tobago at this point, we cannot continue to sustain those programs. So eventually, I imagine probably shortly after the election, whenever that is, we would see where workers will be sent home. We need to be realistic about what's coming. We need to mind our business here in Tobago. We need to understand what the allocation really means for us, if it can take us so far. And what I would also say is that what we have gotten for development, look at it closely, look at the THA administration closely, see what has been done, and you measure for yourself whether or not you feel like it is serving Tobagonians and Tobago best.
Excellent. Thank you, ma'am, and all the best to you, all right?
Thank you.
And we'll chat again. All right.